The route to Israeli citizenship through a Jewish father occupies a unique position within the law of return, creating a pathway that acknowledges paternal Jewish heritage while navigating the complex intersection between Israeli civil law and traditional Jewish religious law. This provision recognizes that Jewish identity and connection to the Jewish people can be transmitted through fathers as well as mothers, even though traditional Jewish law determines Jewish status through matrilineal descent. For many applicants, this pathway represents both an opportunity for Israeli citizenship and an entry into ongoing debates about the nature of Jewish identity in the modern era. Under Israeli law, individuals born to Jewish fathers qualify for citizenship under the law of return, regardless of their mother's religious background. This inclusive approach reflects Israel's recognition that children of Jewish fathers often maintain strong connections to Jewish culture, community, and identity, even when traditional Jewish law would not consider them Jewish. The practical implementation of this policy requires documentation that proves paternal Jewish status while navigating the complex realities of mixed marriages, assimilation, and varying levels of Jewish engagement within families. Proving a father's Jewish identity follows similar documentation requirements to other law of return pathways, but often presents unique challenges related to the traditionally patriarchal nature of many historical record-keeping systems. Birth certificates showing Jewish fathers, marriage records from Jewish institutions, synagogue membership documentation, and community records all serve as evidence of paternal Jewish status. However, the documentation process can be complicated by historical periods when Jewish fathers were more likely than mothers to assimilate into broader society or to conceal their Jewish identity for economic or social reasons. The emotional complexity of this pathway often stems from family dynamics, where Jewish identity was transmitted culturally rather than religiously. Many applicants grew up with strong Jewish cultural identification through their fathers, while simultaneously understanding that they were not considered Jewish according to traditional religious law. This creates a distinctive form of Jewish identity that exists in the space between ethnic heritage and religious belonging, leading to complex relationships with Jewish communities and institutions. For children of Jewish fathers and non-Jewish mothers, the Aliyah process often becomes their first formal engagement with Israeli Jewish identity verification procedures. Unlike those seeking citizenship through Jewish mothers, who generally face straightforward approval based on traditional Jewish law, paternal applicants may encounter additional scrutiny regarding their personal Jewish engagement and community connections. While legal eligibility remains clear, the evaluation process sometimes reflects underlying tensions about the expansion of Jewish identity beyond traditional religious boundaries. Documentation of the father's Jewish status requires the same level of detail and authentication as other law of return applications, including birth certificates, marriage records, and often rabbinical confirmation of Jewish identity. For fathers born in Jewish communities with strong institutional records, this documentation may be readily available. However, fathers who distance themselves from Jewish communities, intermarried, or lived through periods of persecution may have left limited documentary evidence of their Jewish identity. The documentation challenges for paternal lineage cases often prove more complex than those faced by applicants through maternal lines, primarily because Jewish fathers historically had greater mobility and opportunity to assimilate into non-Jewish society. Many Jewish men in the early to mid-20th century changed their names to sound less ethnically Jewish, converted to Christianity for business or social reasons, or simply stopped practicing Judaism without formally renouncing their heritage. These choices, while understandable in their historical context, create significant obstacles for their descendants seeking to prove Jewish lineage decades later. Birth certificates from certain countries and time periods may not indicate religious affiliation, forcing applicants to seek alternative evidence of their father's Jewish identity. This becomes particularly challenging when fathers were born during periods of political upheaval, war, or in countries where religious identity was systematically suppressed. Some applicants discover that their father's birth records were destroyed during conflicts or that the civil authorities in their father's birthplace never recorded religious information. Immigration and naturalization records can provide crucial documentation when other sources fail, as many countries historically recorded immigrants' religious affiliations. However, these records may reflect what fathers chose to declare rather than their actual Jewish status, particularly if they were seeking to assimilate quickly into their new countries. Some Jewish fathers deliberately listed themselves as Christian or secular on immigration documents, creating documentary evidence that contradicts their actual Jewish heritage. Military service records represent another potential source of documentation, as many armies historically recorded soldiers' religious preferences for chaplaincy and burial purposes. However, accessing military records often requires extensive bureaucratic procedures and may be restricted by privacy laws or institutional policies. Additionally, some Jewish fathers may have listed non-Jewish religious preferences in their military records to avoid potential discrimination or assignment to dangerous duties. The problem of lost or destroyed synagogue records particularly affects paternal lineage cases, because Jewish fathers were more likely than mothers to have discontinued synagogue membership during periods of assimilation. While Jewish mothers often maintain some connection to Jewish institutions, even in interfaith marriages, fathers sometimes completely severed institutional ties, leaving no paper trail of their Jewish identity beyond their birth records. When synagogues themselves were destroyed or relocated, these connections become impossible to reconstruct. Professional and business records can sometimes provide evidence of Jewish identity, particularly for fathers who worked in Jewish-owned businesses or participated in Jewish professional organizations. However, accessing decades-old employment records requires persistence and often depends on whether businesses maintained historical archives. Some applicants have successfully used union membership records, professional licensing documents, or business partnership agreements that referenced Jewish religious observances or community connections. Educational records from Jewish schools, Hebrew schools, or Jewish community centers may provide evidence of childhood Jewish involvement, but these institutions often maintained incomplete records or may no longer exist. Parents and relatives who could provide testimony about fathers' Jewish education may have died before the Aliyah application process begins, leaving applicants without witnesses to their father's Jewish upbringing and identity. The challenge intensifies when fathers had multiple marriages or complex family relationships that scattered documentation across different locations and legal jurisdictions. Divorce records, custody agreements, and estate documents may contain references to Jewish identity or religious practices, but obtaining these documents often requires navigation of sealed court records and privacy protections. Some applicants discover relevant information in unexpected places, such as divorce proceedings where religious differences were cited as contributing factors. Insurance policies, particularly life insurance applications, sometimes required religious affiliation disclosure and may preserve evidence of Jewish identity that was maintained privately even when public religious practice had ceased. However, accessing historical insurance records typically requires knowledge of specific companies and policy numbers that families may not have preserved. Estate planning documents, including wills and trust agreements, may also reference Jewish burial preferences or charitable giving to Jewish organizations. The geographic and temporal scope of required documentation often spans multiple generations and countries, particularly for families affected by immigration and displacement. Jewish fathers who immigrated to new countries may have documents scattered across multiple jurisdictions, requiring extensive international research to establish their Jewish identity. Immigration records, naturalization documents, and early community records in destination countries may provide crucial evidence of Jewish identity that was maintained or abandoned during the migration process. Family relationships within mixed households can complicate the documentation process when non-Jewish mothers or other family members are unfamiliar with Jewish identity verification requirements. Some applicants find themselves educating their own families about Jewish documentation standards while simultaneously learning about their father's Jewish background. This process can reveal family histories that were previously unexplored or deliberately concealed, leading to complex conversations about identity, religion, and family loyalty. The implications of successful paternal eligibility extend beyond individual citizenship to questions about Jewish identity and community belonging in Israel. While Israeli law grants full citizenship rights to children of Jewish fathers, their status within Israeli religious institutions may remain complicated by traditional Jewish law. This can create situations where individuals possess full civil rights as Israeli citizens while facing restrictions or complications in religious contexts such as marriage ceremonies or burial in Jewish cemeteries. Some applicants through paternal lineage choose to pursue formal conversion to Judaism either before or after making Aliyah, seeking to align their religious status with their civil status and family heritage. This decision often reflects a desire for full integration into Jewish religious life rather than legal necessity, as Israeli citizenship through paternal lineage provides complete civil rights regardless of subsequent religious choices. The processing timeline for paternal eligibility applications generally mirrors other law of return pathways, though additional documentation or clarification may occasionally be required. Israeli authorities have extensive experience evaluating paternal Jewish identity claims and maintain clear standards for acceptable evidence. However, cases involving complex family histories, multiple marriages, or unclear documentation may require extended evaluation periods or additional evidence submission. The psychological impact of pursuing Aliyah through paternal lineage often involves reconciling family identity with broader Jewish community acceptance. Many applicants describe feeling simultaneously connected to and distant from Jewish identity, maintaining cultural affinity while recognizing their liminal status within traditional Jewish law. The Aliyah process can serve as a form of formal recognition of their Jewish connection while highlighting ongoing questions about belonging and authenticity. For families where multiple children seek Aliyah through the same Jewish father, coordination of documentation efforts can streamline the process and reduce redundant research. Once paternal Jewish identity is established for one sibling, the same documentation typically supports applications from other family members, creating opportunities for coordinated family immigration planning. The success rate for Aliyah applications through Jewish fathers remains high when adequate documentation is available, reflecting Israeli authorities' commitment to inclusive interpretation of the law of return. However, the burden of proof remains substantial, requiring applicants to provide compelling evidence of paternal Jewish identity through official documents rather than family testimony alone. This standard ensures the integrity of the immigration process while maintaining accessibility for legitimate applicants with Jewish paternal heritage. Contemporary discussions about Jewish identity and the law of return continue to evolve, with paternal eligibility representing one aspect of broader conversations about inclusion, tradition, and the definition of Jewish belonging in the modern era. These ongoing debates may influence future policy directions, though current law provides clear pathways for children of Jewish fathers to claim Israeli citizenship and begin their own Jewish journeys in the land of Israel.